Hello, listeners. This is Raahuul Gupta, and you are listening to the CHRO Mindset Podcast.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to season 2 of the CHRO Mindset Podcast. After an incredible first season, we are back with more dynamic conversations and actionable insights. In today's episode, we'll be talking about how can HR build leaders who can handle anything. And to discuss more, we are thrilled to welcome Mr. Raahuul Gupta onto today's episode of the CHRO Mindset Podcast. So let's dive in. Raahuul Gupta is the founder of Transform Ahead. He's a leadership and career coach with 22 plus years of experience in corporate strategy, M&As, and consulting. An ICF professional certified coach, he has coached 300 plus professionals across industries, helping them achieve leadership and career breakthroughs. Rahul's expertise includes leading high value M&A deals, joint ventures, and strategic initiatives. He has held leadership roles at Tech Mahindra, Cognizant, EY, and Deloitte, driving growth strategies, post-merger integrations, and business transformations. An alumnus of XLRI Jamshedpur and a gold medalist in electrical engineering from Jadavpur University, Rahul brings a proven track record of strategic leadership and results-driven coaching. Through Transform Ahead, he empowers professionals to excel and lead with confidence. Rahul, thanks for taking out time to speak with us today and welcome to the CHRO Mindset Podcast.
Thank you, Pulkit. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Great. So let's get going. Today, the topic that we have picked is extremely interesting, I would say, because while HR is thought of as the bedrock when it comes to people function, people management and setting up people for success in various organizations. The interesting nuance here is that how can HRs drive resilience and improve the leadership quality so that they are able to handle every possible challenge, and which is where I think HRs need to sort of up the ante a bit and position themselves as a really resilient master, if you will, right? So let's start off with our first icebreaker question, Rahul. Do you think resilience is a skill, a mindset, or a combination of both? Because it to me it is always a myth, right? There's so many nuances to it. Would love to know your thoughts on how you look at it.
Yeah, sure. Interesting question to start with, Pulkit. But I'll just take a step back also. Okay.
Please.
Uh,
Sure.
because most of the time when we talk about resilience, we think about a leader who can just handle anything and everything which comes their way. Okay. Now, first of all, what does it even mean for a leader who can handle anything? A leader who can handle anything, from my perspective, are those who are prepared, number one, because anything coming your way, you have a vision of how to handle that, even if it is very unexpected. Number two, you have the adaptability, which means once it has struck you, you know how to maneuver through things. And number three, you have the resilience, right? If things don't go the way you planned, or you are going to handle it in a manner, but it's not going that way, then how do you bounce back and how do you come and, make a difference? So that's a leader who can handle anything from my perspective. Now, does
Hmm.
HR has a role in terms of building those leaders? Absolutely, yes, because HR plays a strategic role here through the process of leadership development in any organization, which has to be aligned with the organizational priorities as well, right? So HR drives that agenda where they drive the leadership development programs, which can help these leaders to be prepared, to be adaptable, and to have that kind of resilience. That's what I
Hmm.
understand when I say, to have a leader who can handle anything. Now, just to give you an example, to put some, perspective here,
Sure.
let's talk about the ex-CEO of PepsiCo, right? Indra Nooyi.
Hmm.
I'm sure, you would have read the book, My Life in Full by her, and most of us have, because it's a very inspiring book to go through. And she talks about the life side, she talks about the work side, I mean, the entire journey. And she is one person who was given, who was given the mantle of a very large organization, which was under crisis at that point of time. There were, environmental related aspect which PepsiCo was facing, being a cola company, so to say, right? and she transformed the entire company from being just a cola company to a health oriented company with certain kind of product lines, etc., which I think most people would have doubted at that point of time, that move, right? But the
Hmm.
entire profile of the company changed, and rest is history, and we know, right? Now, was that an easy transformation for a company which has been existing for a while? uh, Absolutely not, right? However, this is a combination of two things: the transformation of the company, and even the leader gets transformed in the process of transforming the company, right? So it's a journey for the leader, it's the journey for the organization. And Indra Nui is one person who has been talking about, HR's role in those kind of things. Now, can a person just get transformed, even if they are the best of the leaders? Can they get transformed intrinsically? Uh, I don't think so. Why? Because organization has to provide those kind of tools, the environment, the mindset building, the support system. Then only any good leader can actually thrive, survive, and transform. I'm sure she would have got the support from PepsiCo as a organization as well, which led to that kind of transformation, both personal as well as the organization. So
Hmm.
perhaps she is an role model, I'll say, when it comes to a leader who can do or who can handle anything. Uh, and that's where I come to now your question, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
a combination of mind, skill set and mindset is what you asked, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Now, the point is, resilience is often thrown, to people as a magic wand that, okay, be resilient and, solve the issue, bounce back. These are all very nice things to read on a morning, Monday morning when you are starting your week and you open your LinkedIn and there's so many posts talking about being resilient and all that. But
Hmm.
to be honest, is it just a skill which can be learned? Or is it just mindset which can be cultivated? I think it's an interplay of both, Pulkit. Okay, and it is
Okay.
also shaped by the environment that the leader operates, their experiences, and to some extent I think even genetics play a role when it comes to being resilient, right? Why I say this, because you can have the best leadership development program where you can put 20 leaders in that program, right? And suppose it focuses on building resilience. Now, not everybody will turn out to be the same after the program, right? Some people, they have this natural knack where they can stand high pressure environment, right?
Hmm.
Especially in a highly regulated industry like BFSI, where
Hmm.
things are very stringent. Or even if you take healthcare, the US healthcare environment is very stringent, right? You
Hmm.
need people who can handle those kind of complex situations. Now, even
Hmm.
if you train all your leaders, not necessarily everybody will come out to be the same. So some people are naturally inclined to be more resilient as compared to the others, right? But again, we cannot overemphasize on those aspects because that's kind of negative spiral also. Then we are saying the personal trait of the leader is what matters, nothing else matters. Yeah, which
Hmm.
is also not true. So it's a complex interplay of skill set, mindset, cultivation, plus to some extent the kind of person you are. That is a combination, I think. So let me stop it here. The last point before I go is uh, the organization process becomes very important, and HR basically holds that process in hand through leadership development, through training, and building a culture and an environment where resilience can thrive. It is not just a training based intervention. Resilience has to thrive. It has to become part of the culture. And we'll perhaps talk more about that as we go along.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Uh, you spoke about three things, right? One is uh, preparation, adaptability, and then bouncing back. And I think
Correct.
both three of these dimensions are critical to uh, when HRs prepare the curriculum for what it takes to develop the leadership. And then great example. I haven't read that book that you spoke of, written by Indra Nui, but from what I've heard now, I think I will certainly go back and read it. And I
Sure.
totally agree. It's a skill set as well as a mindset game because they both feed into each other, which is what even I have seen. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Let's now talk about how, because every role evolves, right?
Yeah.
No role remains the same. I think now with the kind of dynamism and the changes that we are seeing, I think every role is evolving in say 2 years, 3 years time frame. So
Absolutely.
In your perspective, from what you have seen in your experience, how do you see HR's role evolving when it comes to building resilience in organizations?
Yeah, great question, Pulkit. Thanks. Uh, as you rightly said, right, roles are evolving 2, 3 years. Business models are changing, technology models are changing, process models are changing. So obviously, you cannot be doing the same thing over and over again, right?
Hmm.
Uh, Having said that, I think HR has come a long way. Okay. Uh,
Hmm.
I have been coaching a few HR leaders myself, and sometimes I see that although it has come a long way from just being a very transactional kind of situation, especially in early stage of a company, uh, they have a strategic mandate to execute as well. And building resilience in the organization is also a strategic mandate. Now,
Okay.
if they are not able to achieve that, suppose, right, in whatever way they are trying and not able to achieve that, then they are failing in that mandate. And that
Hmm.
is not an option today, given, as you said, things are changing so rapidly, right? I see, a new shiny technology term, coming up every 2 to 3 years, and the market is kind of running behind it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
change is so rapid, right? The shelf life of everything has shrunk so much that
Hmm.
unless you have resilient leaders on the top, if the organization is not resilient, you will not survive those market forces. And HR has a strong role to play. Now, how can HR do that? Okay, in their current role, can they do that? First, obviously, they should come away from this mindset of transaction processing towards more strategic, being more strategic. They can play a role of a risk manager, I will say. Enterprise risk management is a term perhaps we all know, right? What are the major risk an organization faces at an enterprise level? Now, HR can think from people and process perspective that what are those kind of risks which can hit the organization at certain point of time. Can they simulate those kind of crises in as part of their leadership development curriculum or a program, right? Let the leaders go through that, let them simulate the crisis, and let's see how they handle those crises, right? It's just like the fire drill. Before the fire happens, you do the fire drill so that you are prepared for it. Can HR do those kind of things as part of leadership development rather than just doing some PowerPoint based, some training, which is just based on technical and functional knowledge? We all
Hmm.
need technical functional knowledge to survive in the industry. We know that. But
Hmm.
working on making the organization resilient has to be done through these kind of training, which is different in genre. Other than that, I think what is very important HR has to drive is make your leaders emotionally intelligent, right?
Hmm.
Emotional intelligence is the cornerstone for handling crisis, for handling, difficult situations. And especially when, you are trying to build a resilient organization, you need emotionally intelligent leaders. Again, there is no foolproof strategy to handle crisis, but these are nuts and bolts, which if you can put in place, I think things can really.
There. Uh, Moving from transactional to strategic and maybe becoming more forward looking in their approach, right? Which leads me to
Yes.
my next question, talking about risk management. In your perspective, what proactive steps can HRs take to identify and mitigate potential crises before they escalate?
Yeah, great question. One good thing which has happened in the last 5 years, Pulkit, is uh, data and analytics. This has
Hmm.
evolved a lot, right?
Okay.
And computing has evolved to support complex analysis, large data sets, etc. Now that becomes very critical to the HR function also. In fact, HR analytics is a new hot baby in the HR world, which perhaps every senior HR leader also needs to understand and go through, right? It's not about, just doing pivot tables and stuff on your Excel sheet anymore. Yeah.
Hmm.
But if you are part of an HR function of a large organization, you have a lot of data across your performance management system, your ERP, etc., even project data, performance data, etc., all in different databases. Can you collate
Hmm.
everything together, right? Create a system which gives you early warning, okay? An early warning system. Now, what do I mean by early warning? I'll give you a simple example, right? If there is some kind of turnover happening in a particular department, okay?
Hmm.
Uh, can that signal to bigger troubles which can occur later in the path? Can there be a cultural issue? Can there be a talent flight risk which can happen because of that? Can you lose your best guys because there is a cultural issue happening in a pocket of your organization? Can you forecast those kind of things, right? If there are certain kind of high performance player, would you lose them to competition? What you have to do in terms of personalized intervention for those high performing talent who can be your leadership pipeline, right? In the future. So in order to arrest the leakage of your leadership pipeline, what can you do? What is that person looking for? I think there are a lot of data out there which we capture through, quarterly performance, monthly discussions, or even annual conversations. But is HR leveraging all that, putting analytics on top of it, making sense, and then acting on top of it? I think that's the way you can identify and mitigate potential, risk which can happen, right? Even, things around employee sentiment analysis, yeah, or any kind of competitive threat that you have. What will be the impact on people because of that? These are things that, HR can definitely and proactively handle if they are good in analytics. So what I'm trying to say is HR cannot say that I am an HR person and I want to stay away from tech. No longer any function, including HR, can say that I will not learn tech. Everybody needs to learn tech, including HR, and they have to use and act.
Very true. Bang on there. So so I think we have discussed the data side of the house when it comes to mitigating potential crisis. Now let's imagine that, the crisis has arrived. Okay.
Yes.
So, while one has taken care of all the preparation that one needs to do for one to be able to navigate that crisis, but at a personal level, right? What are the kind of leadership qualities that are most critical, especially it could apply to an HR, it could apply to a leader, whom an HR is coaching.
Yes.
Your take on, what it takes to navigate that crisis.
Yeah, sure. And I'm smiling because of a reason, right? Again, as I said initially, that whenever a crisis arrives, first of all, people, especially senior management, will tell their N-1 that, guys, you have to be resilient, you will have to find a solution, you will have to bounce back. All those inspirational talk actually is good, Pulkit, but it doesn't lead to a solution. Okay. Uh, and again, as I said, it's not a magic wand to be resilient. It has its own. It's a journey in itself. But the most critical leadership quality in crisis, which I feel is not resilience, it is humility. Okay, leaders have to be humble first of all, especially in the times of crisis. Right? See, when everything is going great, I can act as a king. But when things are going really bad to worse, I need to be humble as a leader so that I am listening to diverse perspective in the organization. If I just shut it off, you may feel that there is no noise, but actually there will be noise in the organization when things are going wrong in an organization, right? So if the leader has got humility to accept, first of all, yes, there is a problem. Let me accept it. Number two, yes, I don't have a ready-made solution to solve this immediately. Number three, let me hear out your perspective and understand what you think at the ground level. What can we do? And number four, you know, you make decisions based on what you have heard. Obviously, you will have to move fast when a crisis has hit. You cannot get into too much of discussions and all. But are you humble enough to accept that there is a problem, humble enough to say that you don't have a solution? And number three, you listen to people, right? So it's very important to balance decisiveness with empathy and humility. I think that part sometimes goes for a toss, especially when a crisis hits, because first thing people are thinking is survival in the short term. That's it, right? If I survive, then only I'll see the future. If I don't, so let me take whatever step it takes. And that leads to sometimes wrong decisions also, which hits you in the long run.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, awesome. Four qualities, if I were to sum it up, right? Humility, admitting that there is a crisis, right?
Yeah.
And making sure that one is connected via, uh, middle leadership or, lower level leadership to understand what's happening at ground level. And lastly, figuring out what needs to be done because we don't want to get into
Yes.
a decision paralysis, right? So,
Correct.
very well summarized, Rahul. Thank you for that. Uh, Now let's talk about any example of a leader or an organization, whom you admire for how they behaved when it came to facing very adverse situations.
Yeah. Yeah, see, everybody has got a role model. I have my own also. And I have been part of the tech industry for a long time now. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, being in executive leadership role, I understand how difficult it is at the top. It's not easy to navigate, especially, when the size of the organization is like an elephant and you are trying to make the elephant dance, it's very, very difficult. Okay. So the person I admire is Satya Nadella at Microsoft, because I think he became a CEO in a very, very difficult situation when, it was a giant, but the giant was fading, right? At
Mm.
that point of time, Google was shining bright. There were other things happening, uh, but Microsoft had a lot of silos. It was a very political organization, as far as I understand when I see it from a distance. Now, Nadella inherits all that, and he pivots the organization and shapes the culture in a manner where uh, he focuses on learning, he focuses on innovation, right? He creates and fosters a open climate where people can make mistakes, accept those mistakes, again, kind of fostering resilience in one way or the other, right? And somewhere he started prioritizing people over, the standard process, which is very typical of a large organization as Microsoft, right? And you have seen the results also. The growth has of Microsoft has been phenomenal after Satya Nadella took the helm position. And for example, the cloud market, if you go on the tech side, the cloud market, it was dominated by AWS, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you see Microsoft Azure, which is their platform as a service play, and all the products they have built or platforms they have built on top of it, like they are kind of grabbing market share big time, right? And when I talk to executives myself, they are telling me, Rahul, I think the future is Azure.
Mm.
So this
Mm.
big pivot which has happened, taken Microsoft at the forefront, I think it has happened because how Satya Nadella, he didn't use his authoritarian way of doing things, but what he did was he role modeled those behaviors himself, the learning behavior at a leadership level, and people started, following. And that's what happens in a large organization. What the leader does, everybody kind of follows also. So that way, I feel he built a very resilient organization the way Microsoft stands today, and I admire him for those qualities, Pulkit.
Great. Detailed answer. Now let's come back to HR as a
Yeah.
function, and let's not talk about creating a culture of resilience. So, uh, from your vantage point, from what you have seen, what do you think HRs must do to create a culture that prioritizes adaptability and resilience? These were two of the three traits that you
Yes.
spoke of early on. Yeah.
Yeah. See, unfortunately, sometimes HR just gets tagged for, employee engagement and those kind of thing and processing salary and payrolls, right? And
Yeah.
and then sometime if HR tries to do something strategic, just like culture building activity, you know, uh, people are critical about those things also. So I don't think people change their skill set, mindset to become more resilient and adaptable if HR is putting certain motivational poster on the wall and saying that this is how we should be doing or leading, or hosting some motivational workshop, bringing a speaker from outside who kind of pumps you up for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or maybe 2 hours. That's not how change happens. Okay, change happens, and change is a journey. It's not a one point thing, number one. So you should have a plan for that change to build resilience in the organization. Now, that will happen if you create a psychological safe space for people to operate. How I think Satya Nadella fostered an open communication environment. If people have this fear, Pulkit, that if I make a mistake, I'll get screwed because my performance management will go for a toss. I may get fired. And today, if you see the environment has not been very supportive in general because of macroeconomic issues, etc. Business growth has gone for a toss. Layoffs are happening all around the place, right? At that point of time, what do people do? The whole thinking is, let me save my job, let me be defensive. Even if I made a mistake, I will not accept it because it will count against me. But
Hmm.
if HR plays a critical role of, fostering a culture which is psychologically safe, people feel that way, I think it will be a long-term game for HR to do this. So creating that safe space, creating the culture of resilience instead of, a culture of fear, that is very important. And there has to be a collective ownership also, Pulkit, in terms of business and HR coming together, right? Because HR cannot drive culture from outside. It has to
Hmm.
work with business together to create that culture, because HR is still a support function, right? Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, you and I can do wordplay and say strategic and transactional and all that kind of thing, but end of the day, HR, marketing, finance, operations, these are all support functions. The core business function, which drives your top line and bottom line, that has to come along with HR to create this culture, because that's where the bulk of people are lying who actually make a difference to the business. So that partnership is very important. Along with the business, HR can actually create that culture of, openness and psychologically being safe in the environment. I think that will help.
Thank you. And I think somewhere, you know, vulnerability also has a critical role to play, because
Yes.
it's important that the leadership, in fact, make sure that they're vulnerable, at least, from an approachability perspective, right?
Correct.
Which again, I think the humility, the humbleness that you spoke of
Yes.
also comes into picture, because then that sets up the stage for everyone to feel safe in voicing their opinions. So yeah, totally agree with what you said. Thank you for that. Let's now talk about uh, the crisis is done, right? The
Hmm.
leadership and the HR function did whatever was possible to overcome it, right? But then, uh, as humans, I think we can never be perfect, right? And there is always something to learn from every crisis, right? And I do remember that quote. I don't know who said that, but during times of COVID, uh,
Hmm.
people used to say that don't let a crisis go waste, right? So
Absolutely.
there is a lesson to be learned from every crisis. So, which leads me to my next question. After a crisis is over, how can HR and leadership collaborate, work together to assess what went right or wrong, and improve, future resilience? Because it's like an iterative,
Yes.
process.
No, absolutely, absolutely. That resonates a lot with me. By the way, just to tell you something on the personal side, me and my son, we watch one documentary regularly, which is air crash investigation. Okay,
Okay.
and this
Okay.
comes at Nat Geo, National
Okay.
Geography. Okay,
Interesting.
and the idea is they talk about a particular kind of plane crash which has happened, typically a passenger aircraft like a Boeing or a Airbus. Yeah, and then there is an investigation team which comes and figures out why it happened. Was it a human error? Was it a aircraft fault? Was it something when the aircraft was in the hangar, something happened to the aircraft? So they figured out the reason for it, and then as a sum up, they update their standard operating procedures. They change many things so that it doesn't repeat again. Okay. Uh,
Hmm.
but does accident happen after that also? The answer is yes, because there are many documentaries, so obviously it's happening after that also. But if the
Hmm.
same thing is happening again and again, that is a problem, right?
Hmm.
Same
Hmm.
in organizations also. See, when a crisis hits, everybody comes together, you show resilience, you figure out, you handle it somehow. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what
Yeah.
happens post-crisis? Post-crisis, let's party. Okay. I think
Hmm.
most organization doesn't do a solid lesson learned kind of thing and incorporate that in the process. And there is a reason behind it, Pulkit, because I have been in business roles. I can tell you there is so much of business pressure to drive business growth that this lesson learned thing actually takes a back seat, right? It's more like, thinking about, okay, the thunderbolt is not going to strike the same place twice,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? If you go with that mentality, there is no point of doing a lesson learned. But it's a very important step, because you have to ask the question, did it happen because there were unclear roles, or was there a lack of training of the leader or the team? So HR has to ask those tough questions after a crisis has struck and gone, right?
Hmm.
But let me put a little bit of controversial point here. Does HR
Hmm.
have the seat on the table to ask that question to business?
Hmm. Hmm.
It starts from there, Pulkit. So we need a very, a very determined, empowered head of HR or a CHRO to drive this agenda of lesson learned, to ask those hard questions, right?
Yeah.
If HR doesn't have a status in the organization, they will just be process executors. And I have seen in many places, especially I have seen in service industry, for example, they just execute what business tells them to execute. So I think HR has to move up from getting that mind share from the senior leadership team on the business side and make themselves equal and ask those hard questions. Otherwise, there is no lesson learned which is happening, unfortunately.
Very well said. And getting a seat in the boardroom is like the you can't do without it, right? Unless you have a say in the scheme of things, you can give all the gyan, but then it's going to fall on deaf ears, right? Nobody's going to really pay any heed or
Exactly.
attention to what one does.
See,
And
that mind share
yeah,
is important. Yeah.
yeah,
Number
yeah,
two, HR should also have business knowledge
yeah,
because without business knowledge, you cannot have a conversation with the business guys.
right,
So
right.
sometime I have also seen organizations doing a very smart move. They take somebody out of business, right? A very
Uh,
senior guy out of business, and the business guy starts heading the HR function. He is not a core HR guy. He's a business guy, he or she, and can
yeah,
become the CHRO of that organization and drive that business centric thought process within HR rather than, just the people part of it. So there are means and ways of doing things, but as I said, unless you have the mind share of the business, you can't ask tough questions to business.
very well said. Totally agree with you. Thanks, Rahul.
Sure.
Let's now get into our rapid fire section. I'm going to fire some questions at you. If you would want to, elaborate further, that's fine, but we'll try and keep
Okay.
it as short as possible. So
Okay.
first question, resilience, natural or nurtured?
Well, I think it is nurtured, and let's face it. Some people are just wired differently. By the way, as I said earlier, that they
Yeah,
may be naturally geared towards being resilient, where some people go through the training programs, etc., and become resilient under the mentorship of other leaders and so on. So I'll say 80% nurtured, and rest 20% is natural.
okay. Biggest challenge for HR during a crisis?
Yeah, that's a tightrope. In a
Mhm.
crisis, HR has to walk through that tightrope between balancing empathy and being practical in terms of business priorities, right? Just to give an example, layoffs, for example, it's a difficult situation, right? Now, business makes a mistake in terms of estimation and forecasting and hires more people, but then the onus is thrust on HR to fire people and get rid of them. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's a business priority. At the same time, HR has to play the empathy role also. So that balancing act is the biggest challenge which HR has to face because they can actually question their own identity. Are they really empathetic or are they just prioritizing business based on what they're doing at that point of time?
yeah. And it's not just about being empathetic, it's also about, turning that empathy into a positive action or an outcome. I mean, I've seen in recent past few organizations who have, made sure that they provide some sort of assistance to them. Maybe it could be medical insurance or
Yes,
whatever until they get to a new role. And they also
absolutely.
help them find new jobs, new avenues, through their own connects in the corporate ecosystem. So,
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
So, what's more important, quick decisions or thoughtful planning in a crisis?
I don't think in a crisis you have the mindset to do thoughtful planning. It has to be quick decisions. But yes, as I said, you need to listen to other people also so that you are balancing that and you are not just taking based on gut feel decisions, but you are also listening to the environment.
Okay, fair enough. HR's role in crisis communication, essential or optional?
Well, if you ask an HR guy, the person is going to say essential, but I am also going to say essential. The reason being, I think communication is one part which is very critical when the crisis hits because people are in a panic situation and HR
Hmm.
can do a much better job than others. And by the way, if HR doesn't do it, somebody else will definitely do it. And maybe the most loudest person in the room will do it. And that may not be ideal also. So HR should drive the narrative.
Right, right. Agree. Most underestimated skill in crisis leadership.
Most underestimated.
Skill in crisis leadership.
Uh, so I think what is very important is, first of all, not pretending that there is no crisis and everything is hunky dory. Okay, so
Hmm.
being even truthful and upfront to people, right? Uh, at that point of time, maybe people are not thinking about it when the crisis has hit you. Yeah, but that is very essential that you display authentic leadership, right? Irrespective of whether crisis or no crisis, I think authentic leadership becomes very critical at that point of time. And uh, people at that time are just thinking short-term survival, and they will cut corners to do certain things just to survive, which I don't think is part of being an authentic leader. So that should not be ignored, Pulkit.
Great point. One thing a leader should never do during a crisis.
Yeah, I mean, don't give false hope to people, right? If we can share the burden together, but at the same time, if I give you false hope and one day the hope crashes, I think people get impacted big time because everybody today, they run liabilities, they have their own plans, etc. So at least don't give them false hope. I believe that's important.
So true. Awesome. This brings me to the end of rapid fire question. My last closing question for this awesome conversation. Looking ahead, do you think crisis will shape stronger organizations, or is there a risk of complacency? And if you could please also cover it, from an HR function perspective, that would be great.
Yeah. Yes. See, I think crisis is part of journey of any organization, right? Business boom and bust cycle keeps happening. Tech changes are happening. So many things are changing in the market. Even the behavior of newer generation who are coming into the organization, that's also changing. So the way you handle people 15 years ago, you cannot have the same mindset to handle the newer generation who are coming into the organization. And if crisis is hitting the organization, uh, it's an opportunity, I think. Okay, it's an opportunity to one unlearn some of those aspects which I think you have been holding too dear to your heart, and
Yeah.
learn new ways of doing things based on the business reality and environment that you are operating in. So
Yeah.
organization should become stronger if they have this learning mindset and
Hmm.
they unlearn few things and then learn new things. They will tend to become stronger, and it's important for them to do that, right? But if you think crisis will not happen again, I have made the best of the organization, I think that's a myth. It's going to happen. And when the next storm comes, right, whether you would be a shipwreck or you would be a lighthouse is the question you should be asking yourself as a leader, right? So
Hmm.
that should determine your strategy, the go forward strategy. Once a crisis hits and goes away, but then what do we do in the future? How do we transform ourselves? So that's at a business level. You talked about HR. I don't think I will segregate HR out of business, because fundamentally I believe
Yeah.
HR is part of business.
Yeah.
They should mirror the organization strategy and adopt it at a functional level, whatever it means at a functional level. And they should have the similar kind of skill set, mindset, etc., to navigate and to become stronger. See, it has to become the DNA of the organization. That's my main point. The
Hmm.
whole resilience has to become the DNA of the organization, the culture of the organization. The environment should support that kind of thing, and HR is going to play now and in future a very strategic and pivotal role to drive these things through leadership development, through curating experiences, and changing that mindset of people to become future ready.
Great. Shipwreck or lighthouse? I think that very well sums up, what choice one would want to make. Great thoughts there, Rahul. Thank you. It's been an
Thanks.
awesome conversation this morning, I must say. I've taken my notes, right? Lots to learn from this conversation for sure. Whether it's about, the three things that one needs to have in place to be able to overcome any crisis, or to looking at data analytics from an HR vantage point more
Yes.
seriously, figuring out what signals one is getting, and becoming a data driven HR instead of being a very conventionally approachable sort of an HR. as a function. I think you hit the nail on its head when you spoke of all those things, and particularly creating that culture of psychological safety, bringing in collective ownership for people to sort of come together and drive this change, this cultural change of being resilient, was extremely mindful. Uh, and right, I think, and lastly, the icing on the cake was that HRs need to do a better job at building that mind share, right? And I think
Yes.
somewhere somewhere it's all about sort of talking business language, talking more
Yes.
about how the business is shaping up, right? Which is where I think there's a little bit of reskilling, upskilling, or maybe doing away with old skills, unlearning, relearning,
Yes.
whatever you call it, right? That is how the future looks like for HRs, and I think to a certain degree that applies to all functions. Rahul, would you want to share how people can reach out to you should they need any assistance in coaching or leadership?
One, you can find me on LinkedIn. My handle is Coach Raahuul Gupta. And secondly, you can visit our website, which is transformahead.com.
Thank you. Very kind of you. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning into today's episode of the CHRO Mindset. We hope you found the conversation extremely helpful and inspiring. At least I did. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. If you enjoyed the episode, see you in the next episode with another HR leader from whom you can learn a lot. So thanks again. Take care.